Okay, I want to do some quick videos on this new topic, more on rational expressions and equations. I'm going to be using some examples that are in document sharing at some point on a handout that's called More on Rational Expressions and Equations. But to start with, I want you to look at what we already know, what you already know. Okay, so I want to look at a couple examples. I did this in my face-to-face class today, but in case you weren't able to be in that, I wanted to do a couple problems for you. All right, so there's a couple problems that I want you to try. One of them is this. Try simplifying something like x squared minus 100 over x squared minus 8x minus 20. Okay, that's something you already have done, but that's also in this unit, more on rational expressions and equations. And then the other thing I want you to look at is trying to solve an equation like this. You might have something like 1 minus 8 over t minus 20 over t squared equal to 0. Okay. So these are some things you already know that are also in this unit. Okay. And what I wanted to remind you about is that when you're simplifying rational expressions, don't forget that you need to factor first. Okay, factor first. And so this problem right here, the simplifying problem, that was actually on the second test you had in this class. So you got to factor. You start with whichever of these you think would be easier to factor. So the top one is just a difference of squares. So I know that's x minus 10, x plus 10. And then I might work for a minute to get the bottom one factored. Bet it's going to be 10 and 2. And then I can work with it till I get the signs. Needs to be a minus on the 10 and a plus on the 2. And then once you've checked and made sure you have it factored correctly, okay, you've now rewritten it in factored form. You now look for anything common on the top and the bottom that you can cancel out. So I can knock out the x minus 10s that are common. So my final answer, simplified form of this, is x plus 10 over x plus 2. All right, be sure you stop there. Don't go on and try to cancel those x's because the x plus 10, that's in a group. And you can't separate the x from the 10. Same with the x plus 2. There's plus and minuses there. You're not going to be able to cancel out any further. Okay, that would be it. So your answer is just x plus 10 over x plus 2. All right, so that's something you did on the second test. It was one of the applications of factoring. All right, the problem you see over here to the right, okay, this was the kind of problem that you saw on the test for chapter 11, okay? With this one, what you're going to do is you're going to clear the fractions. That's the idea here. Okay, so what you would do is you would look at the denominators and trying to come up with one thing that's going to be able to be used to multiply all the way through and knock out those t squareds. So you're going to look for what's called the LCD. And on this one, the LCD would be t squared. It needs to be big enough that it'll knock out all of the denominators at one time. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to multiply by t squared on the left, and I'm going to multiply by t squared on the right side of the equal sign. Okay. And I think it helps to write that t squared next to each of these. The t squared times the 1, the t squared times the 8 over t, and the t squared times the 20 over t squared. And on the right-hand side, you have t squared times 0. So 1 times t squared is t squared. Okay, now look at this for a second. There's a t in the denominator and there's a t squared here. And that t squared is really on top, kind of like the 8. Okay, so you could divide t into the t squared and you just have a t left. So that middle term becomes just minus 8t. And then see here, okay, so on this previous one, you could knock that out and there'd be 1t left there. But here, the t squareds would cancel out and you'd have just minus 20. And then t squared times 0 is 0. Okay. All right, so what you did is you cleared the fractions. So now you have to look at what kind of equation you have at this point, and it happens to be quadratic. So that determines how you'll approach it from here. You would want to get a 0 if it didn't already have a 0, but this already does. And so you're ready to try to factor. Okay, and the factoring might take you longer if you were really doing it for the first time, but I use this same problem over on the example over here. Okay. All right, so t minus 10 and t plus 2, and that would lead you to two answers, two potential answers, either t equals 10 or t equals negative 2. Okay. All right, now you do need to double check to see whether these potential answers cause you to get a 0 in the denominator. But if you look at the 10 is okay because it couldn't turn these denominators into 0. And the negative 2 is okay because it can't make a denominator 0. So assuming I didn't make any arithmetic mistakes, these should both be answers. Okay, so this one and this one are answers. Okay, all right, so that's what you already know. Okay, so I'm going to stop this video